This video is sponsored by Viltrox. We'd also like to thank Cinemachine and Limitless Studios for providing us with cameras. Today we're out shooting with a Viltrox 56mm f1.7 lens. Tyler and I aren't specifically photographers, but Viltrox did ask us to have a look at this lens in a street photography setting. Now Tyler was also curious about how this lens would perform in a more controlled studio environment, and we'll pop some of those images throughout. Now, because this video is sponsored, it's not a review per se, it's more of an overview, but we will talk through some of our thoughts about the lens. But before we go too much further into the details, let's talk a little bit about what tighter lenses like this 56mm on APS-C would be good for. Today we're going to be working with our fantastic model Anastasia. We'll leave her socials down below if you want to give her a follow. On APS-C, 56mm is roughly equivalent to about an 85mm lens. And typically when you're shooting with a tighter lens like that, it's going to flatten out the face and it actually makes the features of the face a lot more flattering for portraits. Tighter lenses also have fantastic subject isolation, which means that you can stop down a little bit and you still get wonderful background blur. I just really like the way this building looks. There's some nice leading lines heading down the street. And because we're on such a tight focal length, what I really like is that you get that subject isolation. So I'm hoping that there's going to be enough compression that she really pops out of this image. Another thing that we actually really enjoy tighter focal lengths for is architectural photography. A lot of people might gravitate towards wider angle lenses, but we actually find that the compression makes for some really interesting images that really accentuate leading lines and composition. And the tighter focal length really lets you use the foreground to your advantage to really isolate your subject. Now, if you're not familiar with Viltrox, they do actually make quite a few lenses, and we have had a look at a few of them on the channel, including the Viltrox Epic 1.33x full-frame anamorphic lenses, which we found pretty cool. They also make quite a few budget alternatives for mirrorless cameras, and we've been pretty impressed with the quality that you get for the price so far. With that said, let's take a quick look at the lens itself. Now, do keep in mind that this lens comes in at a very impressive 180 USD, so it's extremely affordable. So you should probably think about that when we're talking about anything in this video. Now the body is made out of plastic, but it does feel pretty high quality. It's also pretty small and compact, which is really nice for a lens of this focal length and with an aperture this bright. We did also notice that it is quite sharp, even wide open, and it gets even better at around f2.8. In terms of chromatic aberration, we did notice some here, but it does improve when you stop down, and it's pretty manageable if you use the built-in chromatic aberration removal tools in camera or in Lightroom. One thing that we did notice, however, is that there is quite a bit of vignetting. The corners are pretty dark. Even at 2.8, they didn't really clean up, but at 5.6, they do get a bit better. That being said, a little bit of vignetting can be nice for portraits because it draws your eye away from the corner towards your subject. And that's a fairly typical performance for lenses this fast. Another thing that we did notice is that the flaring is pretty well controlled, and because Viltrox seem to use a different type of coating compared to other lens manufacturers, their flaring can be quite unique. A lot of lenses these days can be quite clinical, so we actually quite like that. Minimum focus isn't fantastic being 55 centimeters, but it is okay for a lens of this focal length. Now we did notice with this lens that the autofocus motors were a little bit slow to respond and could be a bit noisy. However, for basic video autofocus, it was quick enough, and as a bonus, we didn't notice a lot of focus breathing for video work either. This lens has been available for Fuji's X mount as well as Nikon's mount, and they've just announced it for the Sony E mount, which is why we're looking at it today. The lens doesn't feature weather sealing, but there is a USB port for updating the firmware. Okay, let's wrap up and talk about who this lens is for. I think when you're starting out, the temptation is really to gravitate towards something that's a little bit more general purpose. But taking portraits and headshots can be a great way to earn a little bit of money. I think this is a great lens to pick up if you're starting out, you've got a Super 35 APS-C camera, and you need a budget option for starting out with some portraits. And for those people, we absolutely recommend it, especially because it's so affordable. We'll leave a link down in the description where you can find it yourselves, and you can also leave us a like, comment, subscribe, and we'll see you next time.